Today, we welcome to Global Citizenship Interview Series, Gerardo Blanco. Gerardo Blanco is Associate Professor and Academic Director of the Center for International Higher Education at Boston College in the United States. He's also a Fulbright Specialist. His research explores the intersections of quality and internationalization in higher education. He earned his doctorate from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and in 2014 and 2017 and 2020, Professor Blanco received research awards from the Comparative International Education Society, and he has published more than 30 journal articles on higher education topics. Professor Blanco was born in Mexico, and he has taught or conducted research in over 15 different countries. So Gerardo, it's a pleasure to welcome you here. And I'm very much interested in your line of work. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Emiliano. It really is a wonderful pleasure to be joining you today.
And it's my pleasure really to welcome you here. So before this video recording, we were discussing the precious work you're doing, particularly in terms of internationalization of higher education. We were also discussing your work on global dialogue in the classroom, your coming up executive online EDD in higher education. So these are all themes and topics we are going to discuss in this video interview today. But to begin with, all my guests here would go through a very straightforward question to begin with. And the question is, what is, in your opinion, global citizenship, and what does it mean to educate global citizens in the era of globalization?
I think to me, that's an excellent question. And I think to me, global citizenship is both an aspiration and an impossibility. I think, and I really want to stay for a moment with that tension. I think on the one hand, it is an aspiration because it signals to ways of being in the world that go beyond artificial boundaries, right? It is an aspiration because it connects us to the profound sense of humanity as we encounter others. I also like to call it an impossibility because in the current system that we have, citizenship is tied to many different conditions, right? It's tied to our place of birth. It's tied to the conditions under which we are born. We cannot forget, right, that there are millions of people in the world who are born, right, for example, in refugee camps, who de facto have no citizenship, right? They have no country that will recognize them as their members. But I also think it's an impossibility because there are strong forces, right, trying to limit people's mobility in some ways and then exploiting people's mobility in other ways. So I really want to stay with this tension for a moment because I think when we talk about global citizenship education, then we need to educate for both aspects, right? The more perhaps idealistic notion of preparing students for this global world to encounter many different cultures and languages and ways of being in the world that are different than their own, and to embrace those differences with acceptance, with respect, and with an attitude of listening. On the other hand, I also think we need to prepare students and young people to navigate the challenges, to navigate the barriers that exist, that predate all of us, but also in some ways to transform those boundaries and to try to push against those. I think to me, that is what global citizenship education is about, to recognize the challenges but also to recognize that beyond the surface, there is so much more that we have in common. And by the way, not all of that is just positive and celebratory. The greatest challenges that we are facing, we are not facing as individuals or as nation states. We are facing them as a humanity, right? As a human race, as a whole. And because of that, I think global citizenship education is so crucial in the current moment. Let's think about climate change or the pandemic or any of the challenges that we are facing. All of them require our intervention as a human race, not as nation states only.
Right. That's an excellent point. And I believe within the context that you are describing, there is a key notion, a key word, and this is dialogue, and together, of course, with the respect for diversity. But I'd like to focus for a moment and start a discussion with you, and this ties to my second question, to the notion of dialogue, particularly in preparing for this important video interview with you. I realized that you're doing a very interesting work in promoting the notion of global dialogue in the classroom, or at least you've been focusing on that in the past. And so I believe that it's very important that today, particularly because we are discussing notion of citizenship, both, of course, globally and locally, but we discuss what does it mean based on the work that you've been doing, global dialogue in the classroom. If you can elaborate on that, I think that would be very interesting for our audience.
Thank you. I mean, I think I came, first of all, to the notion of global dialogue in the classroom through two different experiences. Both of them have very practical roots. One of them was as I came to the United States first as an international student, and then as a result of that, I stayed as a practitioner of higher education, and very quickly I became immersed. It's not even a choice. From the moment you arrive in the United States, you are confronted with a system of multiculturalism, in many cases pitting racist and xenophobic ideas against sort of notions of migration, what does it mean to be an international student, but also the race relations that exist in the United States. And I encountered in that process that intergroup dialogue, which is this very specific approach for diversity education, was really effective in reducing stereotypes, in promoting cultural understanding, and so on. But I also thought that those conversations taking place in the United States do not sufficiently account for global mobility. Right? They are very effective for thinking about race relations in the US context within people who have been born in the United States, but they're not so effective for global mobility, right? So for example, people from Africa who move to the United States have a vastly different experience from African Americans who were born in the US. So that's one strand of this interest. The second one is also very practically oriented, which had to do with serving as the faculty director of something called Global House at the University of Connecticut. And there, it is what's called a living learning community, which meant that students live together in a residence, in a dormitory of sorts, but they also take courses together as part of their first year curriculum. And the idea of this global house is to bring half of international students living there in that community, and the other half US students. And in doing so, by living together, taking classes together, and promoting activities, fomenting that intercultural exchange and deep experience between US and international students in a space that often is not very cosmopolitan or diverse. So serving in that brought me into the significance of thinking of dialogue as an approach to bring all of these different themes together.
Right.
And it started very small. It really started, for example, with beginning every seminar session just with what are we seeing in the news, and having students discussing current events. And it really was quite shocking how little practice some of our first year university students had in just looking at news at all. Secondly, to look at news outside of their country. Mm-hmm. And we thought that just having conversations about these global events was a step in the right direction. Then we were able to move deeper and deeper into conversations about their home cultures, having conversations of asking questions of other people's cultures, and so on. But it really started small, but very quickly it started snowballing, right, into more and more deep analysis of these common understandings while also preserving cultural differences.
Very interesting, very interesting. And what you're describing here sounds like a critical oriented type of dialogue as it developed, as you're saying, into a deeper analysis of what's going on worldwide. I want to, although this area of global dialogue in the classroom is very, very important, I want to discuss with you a third point related, and perhaps this is also connected to my question, is your important work that you are doing and advancing at the Center for International Higher Education at Boston College. The center is well known worldwide, and in connection to that, also we could discuss your new executive online EDD in higher education, and perhaps we can begin discussing the work you're doing at the center, and tie that with a new EDD online program, if that is a good idea in your opinion.
Absolutely. And maybe I can tell you a little bit about where we are currently in the Center for International Higher Education. First of all, we are extremely grateful for the legacy of our founder, director, Professor Phil Albach. We are so fortunate that he continues to advise and he continues to be available, right, to support the work that we do. And we're really fortunate in that regard. We also continue building on the legacy of the previous director, Professor Hans de Wit, who we know is a staple name in the world of internationalization of higher education. And we also continue to benefit from his support and guidance. But we also recognize that we are at a time of transition, right? At a time when we are trying to move forward new research ideas and projects. And also this provides a great opportunity to sort of look back and look forward. And some of these ideas, of course, have to do with not only how we are changing as a center, but how the field of international higher education is changing around the world, meaning that there is increasing interest in remote, virtual, and hybrid mechanisms for internationalization. Also understanding that there is a lot that we can learn from the comparative study of how higher education systems have responded to the pandemic, and how we can forward to a new future, but also how, for example, many of the assumptions related to internationalizations, such as networks and consortia, such as mobility, such as internationalization of the curriculum, many of the categories and concepts that we have developed in the field are right now in need of revisiting because the realities that we are dealing with have changed so dramatically.
Yeah, yeah. And so what would be at the moment, perhaps a couple of core areas that you're developing at the center, perhaps some general themes that are very, very cool, very important to the work you're doing at the Center for International Higher Education at the Boston College?
Well, one of the, there are a number of initiatives, but I think one that is really front and center of this process is this notion of reimagining internationalization of higher education in a post-COVID world, whatever post-COVID means, right?
Right,
because
right.
Everything that doesn't necessarily mean after COVID in the sense of it's over and then we just move on. But in a way, COVID has already happened. It already has transformed internationalization. So we are working closely with colleagues from the Ontario Institute for the Study of Education at the University of Toronto, but also colleagues from the International Association of Universities, first to map the literature of how the field is changing right now. In a second moment, a second year of this 3-year project that is funded by the Social Science and Humanities Council of Research Council of Canada. So in this 3-year project, we are thinking the second one will really involve looking at these large-scale surveys of universities in the response to COVID-19. And then in a third moment or year of the project to look at specific cases of institutions, to look at how higher education institutions around the world are adapting to these new realities.
Very interesting. And the second part of my question is related to your new executive online EDD in higher education, newly launched. And my question is, why is the program important?
Well, I really think first and foremost that there is a significant need for leaders in higher education. Of course, the EDD in higher education was conceived and decided and launched before the pandemic, but it has only become more relevant. Certainly in the United States, but in many other parts of the world, we are talking about what some observers are describing as the big resignation. People leaving the field, the professional field of higher education to pursue other opportunities, entering retirement, and so on and so forth. We really see that this is a crucial moment for kind of passing the baton to new generations of leaders in higher education. And of course, part of that process has to do with preparing this new generation of leaders. And that doesn't mean that we in any way reject the past. It simply means we need to build for a future that is uncertain, that we don't have a lot of detail about what that's going to look like other than increased complexity. So we really think this is a very good moment to launch a program that offers the flexibility, right, of allowing working practitioners, people who already are leaders in higher education, to not abandon their work responsibilities in order to pursue a terminal degree in higher education. We also value the cohort model so that students learn not only from faculty, but also from each other. And we really think that these characteristics, in addition to the fact that because this is a low residency program that can be conducted primarily online, it will also attract leaders from all around the world and to promote this exchange of knowledge.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was interested in reading the highlights where you mentioning the notion of global social justice which is rare when you're talking about executive programs, because very much oriented to management, but I was interested in that aspect too. So you perhaps want to just briefly mention how the notion of social justice connects to an executive program.
Absolutely, and I think this was a very deliberate choice. Social justice is certainly well aligned with the mission of Boston College. The notion of social justice is central to the mission of the Lynch School of Education and Human Development here at Boston College. And I think for that reason, there was this very deliberate choice to say, we recognize that there are other executive EDD programs being offered. Some of them are also relatively new. Others have been around for a number of years. So as a faculty group, we decided that we would only launch this program if we could offer something that we thought was a new and original contribution. And we found that this combination of both, that global orientation, that commitment to social justice, but also, and this is not necessarily central for all students, but also recognizing that Boston College is a Catholic higher education institution, and there are many institutions around the world that share a similar mission. We thought that all of these different strengths combined could offer something that would be a new contribution and a significant one.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, and so we're heading toward the final part of our video interview. It was a really interesting conversation. Every time I learned something new, and every time at the end of the conversation or dialogue, I ask a very important question. The question is, how would you define global citizenship education using 3 keywords, and why these 3 keywords?
I think the 3 words I would choose are challenging, necessary, and open. And I think the reasons why I'm choosing those is, first of all, challenging, because we live in a world where there is increasing fear of others, where the global, right, is seen as a source of threats and uncertainty. So it's a challenging task. It's also, for the same reasons, very necessary, right? This is not the time to give up on these ideas, right? Or to think that they're just ideals that cannot be accomplished or achieved. I think it's very, very important that we focus on the important work that has to be done. And I also chose open because I really think global citizenship education, like other concepts such as internationalization, are currently at a time of redefining, reimagining, right? So it's not that global citizenship education is already defined for us to implement, but rather we all need to do the difficult work of redefining it. Not even for the 21st century, we're well into the 21st century already, but we need to redefine it for the current challenges that we are facing today.
Yeah. Okay, so to summarize, challenging, open, and
necessary.
Okay, very interesting. All right, so really thank you, Gerardo. It was a wonderful conversation. We discovered the amazing and the precious work you're doing on global dialogue in the classroom, your views on the notion of global citizenship and global citizenship education, the precious work you advanced at the Center for Internationalization Education in Boston College, including the online that you're launching and teaching and directing. So it was a wonderful opportunity to learn more about a wonderful scholar.
Emiliano, it was such a wonderful pleasure. I thank you for your invitation.
Thank you.